that event is over, healing of the leper. The next event, as I said before, was the man is lowered down from the roof, Jesus heals him, and then is accused of blasphemy. And the way that I thought it would go is that, as mentioned in Matthew, at the beginning of chapter 9 is when this story begins here. He entered into a ship and passed over and came into his own city. Mark explains that just that he came into Capernaum. That's his own city, Capernaum. So I'll definitely add that, but I think I'm going to have to put all of these. He went into a ship, then from the beginning of chapter 2 in Mark, again he entered into Capernaum, and after some days it was noised that he was in the house, and then people gathered. In Luke, however, it goes into chapter 5, verse 17, and it came to pass on a certain day, so it had to be some kind of mix there. And it came to pass on a certain day, from Mark, it was noised that he was in a house. Back to Luke, as he was teaching, there were Pharisees and doctors sitting, and then the man is lowered from the roof. So that's what I think it should look like. I just want to read what Michael Rood does just to see if there's anything different. Mark, after some days Yeshua entered into Capernaum, and it was noised that he was in the house. Immediately they gathered, the man is lowered from the roof. Matthew, they brought a man to Yeshua who was sick of the palsy and lying in a bed. Oh, so he cuts out the fact that he went into the ship and crossed over. Why does he do that? Why does he cut that out? It must be later. I really need to find out where he put that, because there might be something important about it. Okay, now Matthew 9:1. Yeshua entered his ship and passed over to Kinneret and came into his own city. He puts that in the same place as Mark 5:21. Passed over by the ship to the other side, many people gathered to him, and he was near the seashore. The same as Luke 8:40. When Yeshua returned, the people gladly received him, for they were all waiting for him. He puts this immediately after he heals the demon-possessed man and sends the swine into the herd of pigs. And then right after that, he puts the question about fasting. Then the disciples of Yohanan, John the Baptist, came to him saying, "Why do we and the Prushim, or the Pharisees, fast often, but you disciples do not fast?" In Matthew 9:14. So he puts Matthew 9:1, then he skips over the man lowered from the roof, and then goes to the question of fasting. He puts the story of the man lowered from the roof right where I was going to put it. But later on, when he puts this question of fasting, he also adds the very first verse from this chapter. And I don't know why. While Yeshua spoke to Yohanan's disciples, there came to him a certain ruler. And then the ruler comes by, Jairus, for his daughter to be healed. I really wonder why he puts that there. Because before, it says he was in the area of Gadara, like the Gadarene demoniac, where he healed the man and sent the demons into the pigs. The other side of Kinneret. Okay, the story of the man being lowered, he begins at verse 2 in Matthew 9. They brought a man to Yeshua who was sick of the palsy and lying in a bed. Doesn't say where. Mark, after some days, Yeshua entered into Capernaum, and it was noised. So it does say that he was in Capernaum, just not that he crossed over into it from a ship. Luke doesn't mention that he was there at all. So I guess he saves that verse. Okay, because after this event, the man's lowered from the roof. Then in verse 9, he leaves Capernaum. He invites Matthew. After that, he goes to... I'm wondering if maybe I should just go with what Michael Rood did and just save verse 1 of Matthew 9, the fact that he's in a ship and crossing over, for later, meaning after he heals the demon-possessed man in Gadara. Because it does say in Mark 5:21, he passed over again by the ship to the other side. Is that the story of the Gadarene demoniac? And they came over to the other side into the country of Gadarenes. It is after he healed the Gadarene demoniac, he passed over the ship to the side, many people gathered around him, and he was near the sea. And behold, there comes one of the rulers from Jairus. I guess that's when he says he passed over the sea. It only says he passed over the sea here in Mark, but I guess he combines that with verse 1 in chapter 9 of Matthew to say he passed over into Capernaum, and that's where Jairus comes and meets him. It doesn't say he's in Capernaum here, though, in Mark. It doesn't say where he's going either. Although it says when he's done, he went out from there and came into his own country. So he might have left there from his own country, went to help out Jairus, and then went right back. Yeah, he heals two blind men while there, returns to Nazareth. It says he's in Nazareth. Let's see what Luke says. Luke, at this place, he heals the Gadarene demoniac, sends the demons into the swine, and then it came to pass that when Jesus was returned, people gladly received him, for they were all waiting for him. Then there came Jairus, and he would come to his house. It still doesn't say where he's going. And he sent out his disciples. He really switches it up and goes back to Matthew 9 after this event, the Gadarene demoniac, and then Jairus. Why does he do that? I figured out why. Let me just state what the question really is. After cleansing a leper in a certain city and withdrawing into the wilderness to pray, Matthew 9:1, did Jesus take a ship and pass over to enter into Capernaum as stated in Matthew, or did he simply enter Capernaum as stated in Mark? Luke doesn't mention where this event occurs or how Jesus travels, so it's really between Matthew and Mark. But there is context in Luke that helps the answer be found. So these are the clues. Matthew's timeline cannot always be trusted. Matthew places this crossing over just after the exorcism of the Gadarene demoniac, then moves directly into the lowering of a man from the roof. Mark also mentions the passing over by ship just after the Gadarene demoniac, but moves into a different event, the meeting of Jairus, next, as does Luke. Mark and Luke agree that after the Gadarene demoniac, he meets Jairus and then heals Jairus' daughter. Luke does not mention the passing over again, as I just said, or how he travels or where he's into, but their timelines agree, Mark and Luke. Gadarene demoniac, Jairus. In Matthew, just before Jairus, or he's not named in Matthew, but it's the ruler and the situation, the context is clear, that's Jairus. Before he arrives to ask Jesus to heal his daughter, there is no mention of him having just arrived in a ship. It just says that he was at a house eating, and the question of fasting and feasting comes up. So Mark and Luke's timeline agree, even though Luke doesn't mention passing over or the use of a ship, the means of travel, or the location. And Matthew and Mark agree that the passing over and the use of a ship was immediately after the exorcism or the deliverance of the Gadarene demoniac. So between these two similarities of Matthew and Mark and Luke, it makes perfect sense that after the Gadarene demoniac, that was when the crossing over took place, and then Jairus was met and Jesus responded to him. Now you could say that Jesus passed over both times, after the Gadarene demoniac and just before he healed the man that was lowered from the roof, but you would then have to be saying that immediately after the Gadarene demoniac, when Jesus did take a ship to cross over to get there, that mention of him taking a ship to come back was a totally different travel by ship. And I guess it could have been, but you'd have to be ignoring the fact that he did take a ship and be mentioning now he took a ship for a different reason. And I don't think there's enough evidence to support that this mention in Matthew of him taking a ship immediately after the Gadarene demoniac is not actually him taking a ship immediately after the Gadarene demoniac. It's a different time he took a ship. So for those reasons, I'm going to actually move Matthew 9:1, as Michael Rood does in the Chronological Gospels, and also as Graham Beach does in the Combined Gospels online, but is different than what Gary Crossland does in the Merged Gospels, as well as Dr. Brown in the Composite Gospels. Now, The Life of Christ in Stereo by Johnston M. Cheney, this is kind of different. He includes the fact that Jesus crossed over, but it doesn't mention the use of a ship. And I'm not exactly sure why he splits that up. It's like he uses part of Matthew 9:1, but not the rest. Crossed over and. That's it. Just those three words. Now, it's not exactly sure how he gets from the location he was just at to the house he's in when the man is lowered from the roof. Mark does mention that he's in Capernaum, and that just before that, the healing of the leper, he was in the wilderness. Mark 1:39, he preached in the synagogues throughout all Galilee and cast out devils. So he's traveling, and then he's in the wilderness, just before this mention of him being in Capernaum. Luke again doesn't mention the location of the man lowered from the roof, just that he was in the wilderness, and then on a certain day he was teaching, and Pharisees and doctors of the law sitting by, and they came from every town of Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem, and the power of the Lord was present to heal him. Then the man was lowered. So Luke doesn't mention where this happened. But Jesus being in the wilderness, it could have been around Capernaum, or it could have been on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And the way he traveled could have been by ship. That very well could have been. But saying this verse, Matthew 9:1, is the way he traveled is not certain, and it's safer to just say that he arrived in Capernaum, or that he entered Capernaum, as it says in Mark, because that includes the possibility that he took a ship, or that he walked, or however he may have arrived. So I think it's safer, and it's also much more likely, based on the similarities in timeline between Mark and Luke, and what is recorded immediately following the Gadarene demoniac in Matthew and Mark. So for those reasons, I will move Matthew 9:1 to later, and I'll start with Matthew 9:2. The man lowered from the ceiling and healed. He heals the leper, withdraws into the wilderness, and then this story comes right in. Before they invite Matthew... Okay, so yeah, that's what I'll do. After that, Matthew is called.